What's up guys, and welcome back. Today in this video we're going to be talking about my final part of my review of Stephen King's Night Shift. Now this is a book of short stories. There's 20 stories overall, and this video we're going to be talking about books 16 to 20. Now the first book I'm going to be talking about is one that was adapted into a pretty popular film in the 90s, and that is Children of the Corn. Now this story is about a married couple who are going through a bit of a tough time. They're trying to sort out their marriage, it's not really going so well, and they're travelling across country to go to the girls' family party or something like that. I think their names are Vicky and Bert. So with most couples who are stuck in a car and are going a long distance, they inevitably get into arguments and stuff like that, and at one point in the story they're arguing and they're not looking at the road, and someone runs out of the cornfields in the middle of nowhere and they run him down. So upon Bert and Vicky getting out of the car to check the body, they find out that it's a young lad and he's been killed, but what they find out is that he's actually had his throat cut and there's loads of blood, and he finds a suitcase which is covered in blood as well. So there's a bit of a mystery about what happened to this kid, and the premise of the story is basically they're in the middle of nowhere in the backwood towns of, I don't even know where it is, but they find one signpost going to a town called Gatlin, so they decide to take the body to Gatlin and just find the police and figure out what's actually happening out there. Most of you have probably seen the story or heard of the film, so you know it's about like a cult of children who basically kill people, and they're all got scythes and they're all dressed like Amish people. I have seen the film a long time ago and I wasn't the biggest fan of it, but I think the story version is a lot better. This is a very short story, but I think they really captured the vibe of like the isolation of being out in the middle of nowhere in the daylight, in the sun, in these crop fields, which is actually quite a compelling location to set this type of story, and it actually got me like inspired to think of different ideas for films that are set out in like the roads near the countryside with the crop fields and stuff like that. So I thought that was really interesting. When you look further into the story, it goes into basically how people can be just brainwashed into believing anything. Cults start with religion or just certain beliefs, and this is certainly no different. The kids in this story have been raised to believe in some kind of entity which will bring upon the end of the world if the crops don't get saved. So I won't go into the story about whether this is actually true or not, but it definitely begs the question about whether someone can just be manipulated into believing anything or not, especially a young child. I recently in the past year have played the video game Outlast 2, which is set in a very similar location, and it includes cults, and it reminded me a lot of that, and it even has some like these like Bible weird cult phrases that were actually followed into the game, so I'm not sure if that was inspired by it, but I really did enjoy the Children of the Corn. It was very like self-contained and short story, and I think it was a very well written story, and yeah, I'd like to see more like this. The last rung on the ladder is the next story I'm going to talk about. Now this one came as a surprise. Whenever I'd spoken about Night Shift, a lot of people said this is one of their favourite stories. This one is quite emotional, and when I read it I completely understand where they were coming from. This one has pretty much no supernatural elements at all. It's grounded in reality, which took me as a surprise considering a lot of his stories are to do with monsters or creatures or just evil entities, and this one was nothing to be seen really. So this was actually a pretty touching story. It centres around the character of Larry, and it begins with him on a plane with his dad, and not the most happy people at this moment in time, and I think Larry and his father find a letter from his daughter who they've just been to a funeral. So Larry's sister has died, and we don't really know what the letter says or how she died or what happened, and this letter basically makes him go through his memories of his sister, and the whole story is pretty much a retelling of this childhood event which kind of changed his life and his sister's life, and it's like one of the moments in their life where they bonded the most. The story is when they were younger and their parents would go out of town, they would go into the big barn which is like 70 feet high or something, and there used to be this like creaky ladder that they'd climb all the way to the top, walk across the beams on top of the barn, and then jump into like a giant haystack, and this was like their way of thrill seeking and just being wild kids really. And the story focuses on this one night where this ladder starts to become unhinged and they're just trying to look a little bit too much, and I won't go into spoilers about what actually happens because that is quite a big part of the story. There is quite a valuable message in the story which is about family and sticking together, and how you should always look out for your friends and family, the ones who are close to you, and you never really know what's going to happen to them, so you'd always should be there for them. It's quite a relatable story to pretty much everyone in the world right now, because as people grow up and they do their own things, they kind of lose touch of what's important and how they can spend their time and how people become distant. And this story really like brings it home to how like you can always forget about things like that in life, and how things that were important to you at one point just kind of go distant, and you should always try and reclaim the things that were close to you. And I can't really go into much into this story without spoiling it, but it was a really like touching story, and it was quite sad as well. So yeah, I enjoyed The Last Rung on the Ladder. Story 18 of Night Shift is The Man Who Loved Flowers. This one is set in New York, I believe, and it's about a man who's walking through the city of New York at night, and he's wearing a suit and he's obviously looking really happy, and everyone keeps noticing how happy he looks, and people are pointing out how he must be a guy who's in love and he's going on a date. And most of the story focuses on like how people interact with seeing him. So he's just walking down the street. Obviously he has interactions in his thoughts about what he's doing, but for the most part it's about people seeing him and how they relate to what they're seeing, their perception of this guy and how happy he is and what he's going through, and how they wish they could be like that, or they're kind of envious of his happiness for this love or this date or whatever's going on. And the guy finds like a flower seller, a florist, and he's basically coaxed into buying a bunch of roses by this guy because he knows that he's probably going to meet the one he loves, and he talks him into it. So the man gets the flowers and he's still on his way to meet someone, and the story continues like this for quite some time, with people just talking about him. It's like a couple who are watching him on the street, and the girl saying, why don't you buy me flowers, don't you do stuff like this for me? And there is quite a big twist in this story. I will say that it was slightly predictable, but I guess that might be just the way I look into things. This was a short and simple story and I really did enjoy it. So the message I took from this one is like, it's all about perceptions of how these people are perceiving this guy when they don't really know him, they don't really know his ambitions or what he's doing or who he's meeting, and they all seem to be focusing on how happy he looks and how it makes them feel. So you see like couples who are sitting on a doorstep and the girl's saying, why don't you treat me like this, when we don't really know what this guy's actually doing till the end of the story. And it's quite important to see how people have perceptions of others when they don't really know them, like first look, first thought basis. So I thought that was really interesting, and I really did enjoy the story. And like I said, it was very simple, short and sweet. I kind of saw where it was heading a little bit before it, and I was pretty surprised and pleased with the conclusion. Now the penultimate story in the book is One for the Road. And now I didn't actually reread this one here because this was in the back of Salem's Lot, and I read that not too long ago, so I kind of do remember the most of it. But it's actually an epilogue to Salem's Lot, and it takes place could be years after, I'm not too sure the time frame, but it's set close by to the town of Jerusalem's Lot. So it takes place in a bar, and there's all the people who are serving drinks and talking, and just on this one night in the cold of winter, it's very snowy, it's like a blizzard, this man bursts into the bar and he's freezing to death pretty much, and he tells people that his car's broken down and he needs help, and he's actually left his car in Jerusalem's Lot. With the history of Jerusalem's Lot and Salem's Lot, everyone knows what's happened there, and they kind of don't want to go into the mystery of what actually happened there, but they do not want to go back there. So they're trying to tell this guy that there's no way he can go back there, he should wait for the morning and get like someone to help him take the car in the morning, because it's too dangerous at night. Obviously with the blizzard, that doesn't help things either. But he's having none of it, and he tells them that he's actually left his kid and his wife in the car because it's too dangerous to leave. So he's in a pretty dire situation if you know what's actually living in Salem's Lot. He manages to get a couple of people from the bar to come out and help him. They're not really happy about doing that because they know what's there, but they think obviously there's a wife and a young child there, they must try and do something to save them. That's about as much as I can say to the story. I can just say that the atmosphere is really good in this one, and this one really reminded me of 30 Days of Night, and I'm sure there must have been some inspiration for that movie and comic series from this short story One for the Road, because it just felt like I was watching a scene from that movie. So vampires in the snow, in the blizzard, yeah, it's awesome imagery just in your head if you think about it from just me saying it. So I really did enjoy One for the Road, and I think it's a great like epilogue to Salem's Lot, as well as the prequel prologue to Salem's Lot, which was the first story in this book, which was Jerusalem's Lot. So yeah, those three books tie up like a perfect little trilogy towards that story. Okay, last but not least on this list is The Woman in the Room. Now this one was quite a bleak way to end this night shift. I'm not sure I would have ended on this one because it doesn't really have many supernatural elements either. This one is basically about a guy who is visiting his terminally ill mum in a hospice or hospital. So she is very close to death and she's constantly in pain. She's pretty much bedridden as well. She can't do much. She's in pain all the time. And the main focus of the story is the guy. He's going there pretty much every day because he knows she hasn't got long left. And he's debating whether or not he should put her out of his misery. He's looking into all these medications, and he's looking about how he can basically end her life in the most peaceful way as possible. And the main focus of the story is about whether he can do it or not. And he keeps going there day after day, and the whole point of the story is about him weighing up the options of whether he should do it, whether he shouldn't do it, will he go to jail, and something keeps getting in his way, in his head. He keeps talking himself out of it, and it's just really sad to see this guy going through this when he's looking at his mum in this way. And he has flashbacks to seeing her when she was younger, and the grandmother was going through the same thing, so he knows he doesn't really want her to suffer like his grandmother did. So it was a really interesting story just to get into the head of his character and just see how he was reacting to things. So there's parts where he'd be talking to doctors and be weighing up the options of how long she has left to live, different ways that he can help her, and whether he himself can solve her problems in a better way by killing her than letting the doctor have its way with her. Whether he does it or not, you'd have to read the story for yourself. It's definitely a very interesting read, and it's very depressing and a bleak story to end on, but as far as a story as a whole, I really did enjoy this one. So guys, this has been my review for Stephen King's Night Shift, his first short story compilation book. This one has been a really good read. Not all the stories were great, but there was certainly a good amount of stories that I really enjoyed in this one. At least, I'd say 7, 8, 9 I really loved, and the rest were just okay. Some of them weren't great, but yeah, I did enjoy the book overall, and I think the amount of stories that I did love outweigh the ones that were just okay. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. Let me know what you thought about my reviews of this so far and the stories as a whole. Which of these would you say made for the best adaptation, or is there any of these stories that have not been adapted which you would love to see on the big screen? I would love to see Grey Matter be turned into like a short film or something like that. I know there are like fan ones out there, but I'd love to see one with a huge budget. So I've got plenty more Stephen King reviews coming soon. I'm going to be starting The Stand pretty soon, but I know that one's going to take me at least a month, 2 months to read. So in the meantime, I'm going to be reviewing the first 3 Dark Tower books because I've already read them. So in the meanwhile, before I finish The Stand, you're going to be getting a review of The Gunslinger, Drawing of the Three, and The Wastelands. I'm not sure how fast those will be coming out because I might have to do a little bit of a reread on some of them and just remember and refresh my memory on them. But hope you stick around for seeing that, and if this is your first time checking out my channel, go ahead and check out the rest of my content. I'm also doing a review of the TV series Castle Rock, which is coming out weekly. I'm doing an episode review every week on a Thursday or Friday, so stay tuned for that. Let me know your thoughts anyway on Night Shift and these short stories, and I guess I'll see you in the next one.